The Last of Us Season 2 is almost finally upon us, and as a massive fan of both video games, I cannot be more excited to see how they adapt Part 2 from the video game. Now, we already know that it's not just going to be one straight season, adapt Part 2. We know that there will be multiple seasons. While we don't know where they're going to cut off that ending, I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about and dive in to thinking, what are the top 10 things that I really need to see from Season 2, specifically as a fan of the video game and someone who loves the video game so much. There are specific things that I hope that still stay there and hope to get new things as well added in that only develop characters and the world more. So definitely leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're a Last of Us fan. We have lots of Last of Us coverage coming up soon. And to just put this out there will be spoilers from the video game. So if you've never played the video game or you don't know about the inciting incident in there, this is your warning. I am going to spoil the video game somewhere in this video, and you need to be warned about that. There are massive spoilers all around the way. I don't want you to come at me in the comments. And also, as I mentioned, I do not know when this season will end and when they'll do the cutoff. There's quite a few different moments. So some of these things may not happen in Season 2, but I could see them happening in Season 3. Speaking of my number one is just an expansion on the Sephiroths in the WLF war anyways. I think this is one of the biggest parts of this game, and specifically there is a detail in there and enough, but I never felt like we got enough or spent enough time with the Sephiroths itself. Personally, for me, I think that is one of the things that ever since they announced this, I was like, yeah, I need more details on this. I don't know if we're going to get Lev and Yara in this season, which makes me think that if they were to develop them a little bit more, we'll probably wait until we get them. But to just throw it out there, the Sephiroths, their religion, the prophet, everything of that nature was always so fascinating to me on the outside world. And I don't know if they tried to just hide a little bit of and keep it more of a mystery, but this is one of the biggest aspects, and I really, really hope they spend more time on this. And alongside this, like, I feel like this should just be touched on more on what's going on with the WLF, what's their motives, like, other than just the Sephiroths being, you know, the baddies. Speaking about expansions, one of the characters that needed more expansion in the game was Isaac, who is famously portrayed by Jeffrey Wright. He's also coming back to play Isaac. He was a fascinating character, but this was a character that when I saw Jeffrey Wright was playing him, I was like, oh, he's got to have a lot of detail in the game, and nothing. It was a very surface level character, but you could tell that there was so much more meat and definitely stuff that they wanted to do with them. And I think it's already been confirmed by Neil Druckmann at the South by Southwest panel that we will be getting more detail about them. But I'm actually curious to see if we get like an entire episode where it's like his backstory, maybe to starting the WLF, maybe to doing all these little things. That would be fascinating to me, and I'm excited to see that nonetheless. Third, spores. Now, we have seen this in the trailer. They have talked about this, but I'm curious to see to what extent do they use the spores. Are they the exact same thing from the game? I was a little bit disappointed that Season 1 didn't have the spores. I understand their reasoning, but I also really like the tendrils thing. So now if they have to deal with the tendrils and as well as the spores and maybe even other things, I think that would be really cool. But even on top of this, the thing I definitely want more of is more infected. I want bloaters. I want stalkers, which again, it seems like they've announced that they are going to be in here, but to what extent? The first season, it was awesome when we did get them, and I like the utilization of the infected, but they definitely took more character work, which is totally fine. But when you have the budget that you do and you have Max to work with, I'm not saying that The Last of Us needs to be a full-on action show, but I do expect a little bit more action, specifically from Part 2, and I think more infected will absolutely add to that. Again, if we've seen the trailer, we definitely see that. It looks like there's a bunch of infected attacking Jackson at one point in the trailer, which is exciting and scary and nervous. To see them more in these Sephiroths and WLF sequences, and specifically the way that you can utilize them to attack other enemies. The infected are a major part of The Last of Us, and I think they need to be utilized more just in this world. 4, more of Tommy's perspective from The Last of Us Part 2. You never really see him in The Last of Us 2. You hear about what he's doing, you see him in the beginning, and you see him towards the end, and then a little bit in the middle, and that's about it. I personally feel that Tommy's perspective is so important to this entire front. that I would like one episode that highlights this personally. I think it would be really cool to take a back step and go and look at everything. Plus, the actor is so good. And I also think Tommy is just a really interesting character that, again, in the game, we got good detail on, but we never got like that full out, blown out detail on. And I think this is the time you can do it. Now, at my number 5, flashbacks and the timeline usage of them. Very risky to how you're going to be doing this because the part 2 is really hard to adapt because there's a lot of back and forth through time, flashbacks, and specifically with characters. And while I feel like it's risky to keep those flashbacks in specific order, I think without it, it could harm the fabric of the story and how it is explored, specifically some of the last few with Joel. I feel, and as we had already seen the trailer, we see the museum sequence, so we know that we are getting the flashbacks. I'm curious to see to what extent are they. Do we get more flashbacks? Do we not? Do we only get like select ones? These are interesting things and interesting developments to me that I'm very curious on to see how they push the story and how the usage of that timeline is. Because for me, the way that and the reason that the story works so well is because you don't know certain things about from the, from our perspective. Obviously, Ellie will know them, but from our perspective, we don't know them, and it makes your heart feel some sort of way. So I'm really very specific with those flashbacks, and I really hope they keep them the same way that they are. 6, this is something very small, and I do expect this to happen in here, and I actually hope for more moments like this, because I think Season 1 actually added to this at some times. Like, specifically the final conversation between Joel and Ellie before they actually meet the Fireflies in Season 1. But for me, keep the smaller moments. Keep the smaller moments between the characters. Future Days, Take On Me, like those are 2 very important moments in the entire game of Part 2. But these moments are so core for the characters. And like the Take On Me specific one between Dina and Ellie is something that you can completely miss from the game. In fact, I remembered I'd missed it from the very first playthrough I did, but luckily I went back immediately afterwards to clean up and get a platinum. And when I did that, I found the sequence. I'm like, why is this not like an integral part to the game? This is, if anything, one of the most important scenes in the entire game. And this doesn't just go towards Ellie and Dina or Joel and Tommy. This goes towards Abby and her crew as well. In fact, I would like even a little bit more of that to come to a bonding situation with them, which is going to be very difficult, but I wouldn't mind it. And I think for me, these little moments are what makes The Last of Us so important and compared to other shows. Of course, sticking with the theme of Abby's crew, at my number 7, explore Abby's crew more if possible. I think they did a good job making us see their specific side and livelihood, but now at the time of the show and knowing we're getting another season means you can dive more into this and take your time. Again, if you're going into season 3 and maybe even possibly a season 4, again, we don't know what their plans are, you can do all of this. You can make us really see that other side, which really hones in the themes of the cycle of violence and understanding like who you are supposed to cheer for or not cheer for at all. And these are the little details that I would personally like to see. Number 8, do not lose the brutality and do not be afraid to go places and make us hate the characters. Certain death scenes should just stay as brutal, if not more now. There's one specifically I'm thinking about with Nora. I think they cut away from it, but I would actually like to see that moment happen. I think a lot of details like this should happen. Shocking things that just happen at the snap of a finger that you would not expect. And I think when these things, specifically one where Ellie fucks up at an aquarium, that for me is one of the biggest moments in the game. And I think if you lose sight of that, it can hurt some of the game and specifically this path of revenge. I really am not too worried that they will lose the brutality, but part of me wonders how far they'll actually go or how far they'll pull away and maybe make a little bit more cinematic per se. But I think this is a game that you need to show that brutality and do not be afraid to show it. At my number 9, and this is the massive spoiler. So again, if you're still sticking around, you've been warned. It has to be said and has to be said here. Joel has to die. I love Joel. I love Pedro Pascal as the character. It kills me. It killed me when I played the game. It killed me when I was spoiled about the game, and it still kills me this day when I go back and play through the games. But Joel has to die. And not at the midway. He has to die at the start. He has to die at the start. It's the inciting incident. I don't want to see anyone else die. Again, I'm not thinking that's the way that they're going to go, but you never know. And I don't feel like, personally, I don't feel like they'll lose sight of this. I think there's always a chance to take a risk here and maybe impress me as a fan. But I would predict that he's dying in the first 3 episodes. One of the first 3. And that's going to push Ellie on her journey. And for me, this is the thing. Joel killed a lot of people. And he's going to make a fucking mistake. And, yeah, he has to die. That's it. Like, you can't change that. Maybe change how he dies. Sure, whatever. I don't think you should. I think, again, that goes back to the brutality thing. You got to show it all. For me, this is one of the most important things that The Last of Us Season 2 needs to do. And for my 10th and final thing that they need to do, this one's kind of an overall thing, but there's a lot to explore here, and I'd love to see if they touched it all. But Last of Us Part 2 is huge, and some hate the pacing and some don't, but one thing is the jump between Abby and Ellie. Don't give us one character and then jump into the next like the game. This specifically is what I'm talking about. Is there's a part in the game where you're playing as Ellie and then boom, you switch to Abby for literally the rest of the game. And then boom, you switch back to Ellie for the back half of the game, which is like the last, hour or 2. You can't do that here. It's risky. It's very risky. Like I could see in some world where season 2 is all Ellie and then season 3 jumps into Abby's storyline and then season 4 is like that final remark of it, which I don't think we're going to the California stuff, but if we do, please flesh that out. Regardless, don't think they're doing it even close because there's so much to explore. But I really think that you need to jump back and forth between them. It's going to make it hard. The fans sometimes are not going to want to, but if you think back to Game of Thrones, things like that, they did a really good job of bouncing between characters that we absolutely hated, characters that we loved, and always making it interesting to showcase different sides. What is another side doing? And usually the characters we would switch back to, the ones that we didn't like switching back to were the ones that were just annoying, like Bran. Like, we didn't care about their storyline. But Cersei, we always loved going back to Cersei. We always loved going back to Jon Snow and all these different things. So I think this is how they're going to do it. I hope they do. I think it keeps up the exploration as well. And I'm really excited to see Caitlin Dever as Abby. I think she's going to pull it off immensely great. The 10 things that I think The Last of Us Season 2 need to happen. Now, again, some of these might portion to Season 3, which then, again, when Season 3 gets a release date announced and we get a little bit closer, we'll also do another one of these follow-up videos. I'm a major fan of The Last of Us, as I mentioned. The Last of Us is my favorite video game of all time. I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, so make sure to hit those down there. And, of course, until next time, stay classy.